The House Rules Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Schuette.
Here.
Representatives Aragona.
Here.
Wenzel. Here. Martin. Here. Posthumus.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Whitwer. Here. Liberati.
Here.
Hersberg. Mr. Chair, you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Representative DeBoer moves to adopt the minutes of the March 13th meeting. There being no objection, the motion prevails by unanimous consent. So we're going to be doing a mix of testimony and taking up some bills today. We're going to start with a presentation from Robert Anderson of the Michigan Farm Bureau. Mr. Anderson, thank you for coming, and please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee. As mentioned, my name is Rob Anderson. I manage the Government Relations Department for Michigan Farm Bureau. We appreciate being part of the conversation, just the general conversation on regulatory reform and administrative rules. So if I could briefly, just Michigan Farm Bureau, we're the state's largest general farm organization. We represent over 40,000 farm families in Michigan. Our policy positions are shaped through a grassroots process where our local members engage in development, debate, and adoption of policies that come together at both the state, county, and federal levels. But we're very proud of our policy process. Our state-level policies are encapsulated in a policy book, which we deliver to all the legislators' offices shortly after the first of the year. So hopefully you've all seen that in your office. And we're certainly willing to talk to you about anything in that book as issues arise. As you might imagine, our members have policy on a wide range of topics that affect them as agriculture producers as well as business owners. Regulatory compliance is an issue our members discuss at great length, and through these discussions, they work hard to create policy that expresses with how these challenges affect them, as well as paths forward and opportunities to solve some of those challenges. For Michigan farmers, regulations aren't just lines in a rule book. They directly impact their families, businesses, and way of life. With slim profit margins and high input costs, even small regulatory changes can have major ripple effects across the industry. And when regulations are unclear, duplicative, or overly burdensome, they don't just slow down business, they add stress to families, they limit reinvestment in local communities, and in some cases, they threaten the future of a farm that may have been in the family for generations. With respect to the administrative rules and regulations, our members have established several policy principles they believe balance regulatory oversight and economic growth. They believe rulemaking authority should be limited by legislative actions. Regulations should be understandable and easy to comply with. That any penalties should fit the violation. Our members also believe that state agencies should conduct science-based studies, standardized risk assessments, cost-benefit analyses, and economic impact statements for proposed regulations. Our members oppose rules that are more stringent than federal standards. They oppose rules that are unwarranted or retroactively penalize practices that were previously allowed. And they oppose requirements that studies be done that are redundant and redo what has already been done. In general, our members believe Michigan's regulatory infrastructure must continue to foster economic growth by providing transparency and clarity in developing and issuing permits. They believe policymakers should have a clear understanding of the science underlying their decisions, especially in a time where such information is increasingly complex. Regulatory agencies should be subject to a review process for their permitting decisions, given the highly technical nature of many of these determinations. As an example, and not to single out any one agency, but we were disappointed in the last legislative session when the legislature repealed the statutes establishing the Environmental Rules Review Committee, the Environmental Science Advisory Board, and the Environmental Permit Review Commission. We believe the state of Michigan should reinvest in these bodies. These are ultimately valuable tools in reaching our economic development and population goals. These entities provided an important level of review and transparency that encourages businesses to invest in our state, providing the jobs that Michigan needs to retain talent. So to conclude, again, I just want to thank the committee for the opportunity to offer our members perspective on the broad topic of administrative rules and opportunities they believe would help balance economic growth for Michigan with the regulatory oversight necessary for state agencies. So thank you again, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So, we heard from the governor in her State of the State that there was a need to streamline permitting and look for ways to cut red tape. If, with your Farm Bureau hat on, you were to say there was one rule to put into statute or a, glaring item that's, too onerous for your members that we could work on legislatively, what would be something off the top of your head?
Well, certainly streamlining and getting a shortened response on permit reviews or decisions like that are very important. We do see times when things get delayed for months, sometimes years, and those are certainly challenges for the investment that goes into many projects or many ways to expand or grow agriculture businesses. But at the same time, I think the legislature's role in oversight of the rules process is very important, and the authority that you delegate to agencies in their ability to administrate and promulgate rules is something that you should hold on to, and you should use diligently. Again, I think if you would talk to our members about challenges they face, being heard is probably high on the list of their concerns, and they feel like sometimes there's a dead end with many of the agencies that they work with, and the ability to have accountability for all parties is a big part of that. So the legislature provides that, and we think that your role in that is very important.
Thank you. Any other questions, members of the committee? Well, Mr. Anderson, we appreciate your testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're moving around a little bit, so as we have a lot of schedules to balance here, the committee will now be taking up House Bill 4235, and we'll be hearing testimony from Representative Smit. Representative, come to the Speaker Pro Tem, come to the table and begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, members, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for allowing me to come and testify on behalf of my bill 4235. This House bill aims to enhance cybersecurity by regulating the use of certain applications on government-issued devices. The key provisions to this bill include blocking and restricting access. Public employers are required to block prohibited applications from public access on their networks and restrict access to these applications on government-issued devices. The definition for the prohibited application would be prohibited applications are defined as internet applications created, maintained, or owned by foreign principals from countries such as China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, Syria, or Venezuela. These applications are characterized by activities like collecting sensitive data, compromising emails, conducting cyber espionage, tracking users, or spreading disinformation. There are exceptions and waivers. The bill includes provisions allowing law enforcement to use prohibited applications when necessary for public safety or investigations. Additionally, public employers can request waivers from the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget to permit certain employees to access prohibited applications under specific certain conditions. Those measures are designed to protect public employers' digital assets and networks from the security threats associated with certain foreign-owned applications. There is bipartisan support for taking these actions. Both of the Trump administration and Biden administrations have prohibited certain applications on government-issued devices due to data security concerns. More than 30 states have already also banned certain applications from state-issued devices amid the national security and privacy concerns that we seem to be seeing more and more frequently. So that's the gist of the bill before you that I wanted to just come and testify on. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Smit. I know this comes before the Rules Committee as it involves DTMB issuing rules and pursuant with this needed procedure. Understand that's a big ask for the administration, but this is a serious issue facing our state and nation. So appreciate your testimony and your leadership on this bill. I understand there is a substitute that updates the date timeline, H2, to the end of this year, just to give a little bit more time.
Correct, yes.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Smit, for your testimony. And seeing that there is an H1 substitute for House Bill 4235, Representative Martin moves to adopt the H1 substitute for 4235. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Schuette,
Yes.
Representatives Aragona,
Yes.
Wenzel,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Posthumus,
Yes.
DeBoer,
Yes.
Whitwer,
Pass.
Liberati,
Yes.
Herzberg. Mr. Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 pass. The motion prevails.
The H1 substitute is adopted. And Representative Aragona moves to report HB 4235 as substitute H1 with recommendation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Schuette,
Yes.
Representatives Aragona,
Yes.
Wenzel,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Posthumus,
Yes.
DeBoer,
Yes.
Whitwer,
Pass.
Liberati,
Yes.
Herzberg. Mr. Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 pass. The motion does prevail.
All right. House Bill 4235 as substitute H1 is reported with recommendation. And the House Rules Committee will stand at ease. Well, Vice Chair Aragona and Vice Chair Whitwer, it is an honor. Chair Aragona, and Vice Chair Whitwer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to make myself permanent chair of this committee. No? Okay. Committee will now come to order. Chair recognizes Representative Schuette.
Thank you. Sorry to speak out of order there in front of this esteemed body, and it's truly an honor to testify for the first time in front of the House Rules Committee. So my legislation, House Bill 4240, works in conjunction with Representative Hoadley's legislation, in that it prohibits state agencies and local governments from entering into constraining agreements with foreign entities of concern, and it requires that our public bodies disclose gifts and agreements that they enter into with foreign entities of concern. I've spoken before about my work as an intelligence officer with the Department of Defense. In that role, we would monitor and analyze how nations like China, Venezuela, Russia would try to gain influence and control and manipulate other nations across the globe. And it's concerning that we see these same types of activity and attempts to undermine our national security here at home in Michigan as well. And, these countries, China, Venezuela, they don't play fair. They are aiming to use every single lever of power to try and jeopardize our nation's strength. And, behind uncovering an espionage operation at Camp Grayling, we've seen blacklisted companies try to establish footholds in Michigan at taxpayer expense, and we've seen an expansion of Confucius Institutes in our schools and colleges. And this is part of a whole-of-government operation to bend, influence, and contort our state to their agenda and to their will. So, when I had a security clearance as an intelligence officer, getting that clearance required a lot of work. It required subjecting yourselves to the limits of gifts and you accepted and the relationships you maintained. And I think you do that because you have an honor to serve. And you're entering into that honor to help protect the public trust. So, I would think it's reasonable to ask our government institutions to similarly act in our national interest, put America first. And again, this is coming before the esteemed Rules Committee, as it again involves DTMB to promulgate rules. I understand that'll be an administrative lift, but I think this is a needed effort for our administration to take on. So with that, Chair Aragona, any questions?
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think we're good. Thank you, Chair. Committee will go at ease. Call the chair.
The committee will come to order. And I'd like to thank Vice Chair Aragona for stepping in and returning the gavel. It was very, very magnanimous of you. So, seeing that, Representative Aragona moves to report House Bill 4240 with recommendation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Schuette?
Yes.
Representatives Aragona?
Yes.
Wenzel? Yes. Martin?
Yes.
Posthumous?
Yes.
DeBoer?
Yes.
Whitwer? Pass. Liberati?
Yes.
Hersberg? Mr. Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 pass. The motion does prevail.
House Bill 4240 is reported with recommendation. Now, Representative Martin moves to report House Bill 4241 with recommendation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Schuette?
Yes.
Representatives Aragona?
Yes.
Wenzel? Yes. Martin?
Yes.
Posthumous?
Yes.
DeBoer?
Yes.
Whitwer? Pass. Liberati?
Pass.
Hersberg? Mr. Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 pass. The motion does prevail.
House Bill 4241 is reported with recommendation. All right, and continuing our zigzag in committee today, we're now going to be hearing from Shane Hernandez from Associated Builders and Contractors. Mr. Hernandez, we appreciate you for coming, and please begin when you are ready.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Shane Hernandez, president of Associated Builders and Contractors of Michigan. We're a building trades association with 3 chapters across Michigan, representing over 1,000 commercial and industrial contractors and subcontractors. ABC of Michigan is the legislative and government affairs arms representing those members in Lansing. I will explain this large stack of paper fittingly wrapped in red tape sitting next to me shortly. But I want to be sure everybody knows what we hope to achieve with our testimony in committee today. We're not here to argue what the law is or what the role of any given department is. I don't think our views at ABC are any secret. We believe in open competition, free enterprise, and winning jobs on the merit of our work. But those are discussions for another day. Today we want to have a conversation about the fair and reasonable application and enforcement of rules and regulations. We want to talk about concerns our members have when it comes to navigating the rules and regulations that are in place. We hope that we can have better transparency about the enforcement of rules and ultimately how we can build a stronger relationship with departments that we're discussing today. I'm going to cover kind of 3 areas that have been a topic amongst ABC members. Rules and regulations have been a hot topic of conversation at our board meetings recently, and so it's fitting to get invited to this committee hearing. So let's start with this stack of paper next to me. This is the unofficial listing of Michigan's prevailing wage rate classifications. That's 14,150 pages of rate classifications. So for context, according to the Michigan Construction Industry Workforce Analysis, there were approximately 316,000 construction workers in Michigan in 2022. So if you were to put 30 names of construction workers on a sheet of paper with a pay classification for that individual, so you could have a pay classification for every single individual construction worker, you'd cut that down to 10,000 pages. So as you know, prevailing wage was re-implemented by a vote of the legislature. It's been the law in Michigan for over a year now. So now picture being a contractor bidding on a school project. You've got 14,000 pages of classifications to think about and a rulemaking process that still hasn't happened yet. But the law specifically says you can be penalized for violations of the law. Seems like a risky proposal to me. Adding to this confusion, one of our members had an inquiry with the department about the rates posted to the website, And the department responded telling us that there's an ongoing issue with the system at DTMB and that the rates that are published could be wrong. This conversation took place in January of 2025, nearly a full year after the implementation of this law. So think about that. A law that threatens penalties for each violation, and the information on the website nearly a year after implementation might be wrong. And if you're questioning, would anybody really go after someone for a minor mistake while trying to comply with the law that hasn't had these rules issued yet? Well, let's go back to 2005 when the state's previous prevailing wage was in place. Beist Electric, an ABC member in Kalamazoo, was awarded a bid for $3.5 million to work in Lakeview High School. Shortly after the bid was awarded, IBEW Local 445 started a 2-year process of filing FOIA requests and a prevailing wage complaint with the then Department of Labor and Economic Growth. After 2 years of inquiries, and Beist willingly, they weren't required to open up their payroll, but they willingly opened up their payroll documents for the IBEW, it was determined that in the $3.9 million of work that had been completed, Beist had underpaid one employee by $10.56. The quote in the Battle Creek Enquirer by the union representative was, "A violation is a violation." So as this legislature rightfully discusses overcrowded classrooms and improvements needed in our schools, ask yourself, is this the best way to get those goals accomplished on time and on budget? The second subject I want to talk about is MIOSHA. And I want to start off by saying safety is priority number one at ABC. ABC has developed our own safety plan known as STEP. STEP members are known to be 7 times more safe than the industry standard. STEP is used nationally. And on top of STEP, ABC has a workers' compensation plan of our own that places a significant emphasis on safety. We're also proud to have an alliance with MIOSHA, which we are currently looking forward to renewing. The alliance recognizes STEP, lays out how ABC and MIOSHA can work together to educate workers on safety. Safety in the workplace is our priority. ABC has had a recent uptick in concerns in our interactions with MIOSHA. An example, on a job site in West Michigan where there's a violation, we acknowledge there was a violation in one part of the site. It wasn't our contractor's violation, but rather than citing the general contractor in charge, the contractor responsible for the violation, or any contractor working directly in that area, as has been common practice in the past, every subcontractor, including the ABC member who was not near that part of the site, was cited. Even more concerning, the MIOSHA inspector on site asked the subcontractors who were present to walk over to go see the violation and then cited them for being near the violation after taking them to the violation. We've had instances where contractors cooperate with MIOSHA to discuss any concerns. No citations are made on the site visit. The inspector leaves on good terms, and 3 weeks later, a citation is mailed. We've had a member FOIA MIOSHA for the records on their own case, and what they eventually received, and this is recent, what they eventually received was a CD-ROM with the documentation. This contractor actually had to go out and buy a CD-ROM drive so they could actually see what their own violation was. In another case, Eagle was on site discussing an asbestos issue with one of our members. And they told the contractor that because the asbestos content was below a certain percentage, it was not considered critical exposure, in which case that means you can simply separate it into its own dumpster. Your workers don't need to be suited up, they don't need to bag it, they don't need to bring in equipment to control air particles, things like that. As the contractor worked to complete this as instructed by Eagle, MIOSHA came on site and cited the contractor because they deemed the exposure to be critical, in direct contradiction to Eagle. Contractors will tell you that they can recall times decades ago when MIOSHA would come on site and the employees would leave the site and not communicate with them. We're proud to have an alliance and communicate with them today. We take job site safety seriously. We need clear lines of communication and fair application of rules so we can keep that open communication. Going back to the way it was done before isn't good for us, it's not good for MIOSHA, and it's not good for the safety of the workers on the job site. Lastly, I want to address rising concerns with Eagle, and I'll go through these quickly so we can finish up, but our members will tell you these issues for the most part have started in the last 5 to 6 years. The first instance I spoke to a member about was on an industrial park site. This site was developed 15 to 20 years ago. Many of the sites were built out shortly after the development of the industrial park. But more recently, the developer returned to the site to build on the few remaining sites. I believe there were 2 or 3 remaining sites. Unfortunately, Eagle stepped in and required a wetland study. The problem with the wetland study is it means that the answer to whether or not a building can go on the site is automatically no. And unless the developer can prove there's no other viable sites in the area, they can't come back and do mitigation. They simply have to abandon the sites that were developed as an industrial park. Michigan was once a leader in manufacturing. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars attempting to bring manufacturing back to the state of Michigan. We've developed mega sites. And while recently read in the news that at one point the state thought it was a good idea to clear forest land to build renewable energy, these sites were developed for manufacturing and will now sit empty, or at best cost significantly more to complete. Another example brought to me by a member is a lakefront site where the state actually granted money to clean up an old contaminated industrial facility, develop infrastructure, and build housing on the site. Eventually, the state which issued funding for the project stepped in and determined the contaminated industrial site was actually a wetland. $3 million of on-site mitigation later, the purchase of $1 million in property at another location, this 80-unit housing development turned into a very expensive 18-unit housing development. This legislature will spend significant time, rightfully so, working to provide affordable housing in Michigan, while state departments make the development of affordable housing that much more difficult. Another project where a member is renovating a healthcare facility, this is pretty recent, was issued a stop work order by Eagle because there was not an asbestos survey and remediation plan in place. There's a critical detail of this project. The building being renovated was built in 2007, long after asbestos has been used in building construction, particularly in healthcare construction. My last example from a developer who builds subdivisions for single-family homes. He explained to me how we've gone from the DEQ, which would respond to a 90-day permit approval period within the first 20 to 30 days, to Eagle, who will take 80 days or more to tell you that your permit needs changes and we're going to restart the 90-day period. The same developer cited situations where they can get approval from the Army Corps of Engineers only to be denied by Eagle. Recently developed subdivision where sites were planned to be sold for $75,000 will now sell for well over $100,000 due to timeline changes, cost overruns while dealing with Eagle. I'm sure many of us can remember not that long ago when you could build a 1,000-square-foot house for not much more than the cost of a site now. I'll close by sharing some member feedback that caught me by surprise. A common comment from every member of ours that I talked to leading up to today was that they would rather deal with the federal government and their regulations than with the state of Michigan. At least their comment was that at least the federal government's requirements are well documented, communicated, and fairly applied, whether it's the EPA or Davis-Bacon, the federal prevailing wage, that our members viewed it as easier to work with them than the state of Michigan. And mind you, they're talking about the Biden administration. They would rather work with the Biden administration's EPA or prevailing wage than the state of Michigan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shane. Representative Whitwer?
That was quite a lot of information that you just gave all of us. Do you think we could get a copy of your presentation?
I could share this with you. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez, a couple questions. First off, you mentioned how many of your members have to report to both MIOSHA and Eagle for the same requirement. That overlapping of reporting requirements, how much time and money would you say that adds on a typical project? I imagine it varies widely, but
yeah, I'm sure it varies widely, and I can say on that healthcare project in particular, I know the member was surprised that the issue actually came from MIOSHA rather than Eagle on that project, and that's where we talk about consistency of rules, consistency of application. I asked them, what's the next step now, and they said, well, we've got to go out and do this mitigation study, so this project could sit, vacant for 2, 3, 4 weeks while we wait to do this, and that's going to add cost to the process as well.
Yeah, so I'm very sympathetic to the 14,000 pages you all have to comply with on prevailing wage, but I'm thinking if we're trying to take up Governor Whitmer on her offer of trying to streamline and cut red tape, at the very least, having the agencies under executive control, having one consolidated thing for you to follow, one hoop to jump through on a specific issue seems like an eminently reasonable ask. And then I know you have, again, ABC's a broad organization working, you have builders, you have electricians, you have a whole host of the skilled trades, and you work on, I know Representative Aragona has led on our task force to reduce housing costs in our state, but, we also hear from, childcare providers that it's too hard to get open and operating. I imagine all of these, thousands of pages of red tape that you have to comply with, makes some of the most acute costs that are facing Michiganders even harder to bear.
Well, it's definitely affecting costs. It affects timelines. And again, what I wanted to convey today is, we want to be safe as much as anybody. We value our relationship with MIOSHA. We want to protect the environment as much as possible. That's why I shared examples of things that were developed as industrial sites and later kind of the rug was pulled out from under, or the state actually gave money to clean up a contaminated site and then decided it was a wetland. That's where the goal today is to talk about just consistent and fair application of rules so that we can actually have some anticipation of what's coming and plan for it.
Thank you. Tulio, or Representative Liberati, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. You talk about the importance of safety and some of the programs you put in place. Can you go a little deeper into what safety measures you've put in and why?
Yeah, so STEP is a nationally recognized, I believe it's a 6 or 7 step process where we work our members through these different steps of the safety program. MIOSHA recognizes the STEP program at the state level. OSHA recognizes it at a federal level. It's a federal program used through all of our chapters nationwide. And as I stated, if you work your way through to the highest level of STEP, our members that are in that level and have completed all of those programs are about 7 times safer than the national average as far as incident reports on sites.
Representative Aragona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Shane, for being here. I just want to ask, some of these regulations you're talking about, do you have any type of cost estimate as to the average increase in costs that has changed as these regulations have gotten added, or do you have a estimate on how much additional time it's taking for projects on average?
Yeah, I think it's a case-by-case basis. I talked to our member that had the stop work order because of the asbestos survey on a building built in the 2000s, and asked them, and they said, this report could be a few $1,000s. It's more the time. It's the 3 to 4 weeks that we're going to be shut down. But when you start looking at some of these subdivision sites where the member cited an increase in per site of $25,000 to $50,000 per site, you start to divide that up over a 1,500 square foot home, and you start to realize why we've added so much to the cost of a home. Or the lakefront site where there was going to be 80 units and now there's 18. It's not just the cost that we added because you're dividing it among less units. We lost 62 good housing units while we have a housing shortage in the state of Michigan.
Very helpful. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, Shane, thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. And that's a lot of red tape to cut, that's for sure. All right. We will now be taking up House Bills 4125 and 4129. And Representative Andrews will be testifying. We appreciate your patience. And Representative, please start when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Committee, the 2 bills in front of you here, mine and McFall's, are part of a larger package around nuclear energy in the state of Michigan. To kind of briefly explain what the overall package was trying to accomplish, these are bills that Representative Wenzel, myself, and last term Representative Filler worked on with the sort of express question of how do we make Michigan the leader in the nuclear industry? How do we bring this industry to the state, not just existing technology, but future technology? And the answer was sort of 2-part. It was about research and kind of incentivizing the industry, but also about workforce. As we all know, industry tends to go where the workforce is. So the 2 bills here require some rules making out of Leo around the workforce training and incentive program. So the one creates a program through our colleges and universities where there would be a grant for nuclear workforce and hydrogen workforce training. So, that's a program that would need to be administered through the state in order to incentivize these programs to exist so we can train this workforce across Michigan. We already do a great job of it at, U of M and MSU, but our community colleges, Lake Michigan College in my area in particular, used to do this for Cook and Palisades and would love to do it again. Could train some of the workforce that doesn't necessarily need to be engineers, but just need certification programs. The other side of it is creating an incentive for workforce to stay in Michigan or to come to Michigan if they've been trained in a neighboring state. The idea being, right now, again, MSU and U of M have two of the top nuclear engineering programs in the country. Problem is that the workforce that we train tends to leave, mostly ending up on the West Coast. So if we can create an incentive for workers to stay in Michigan after we've invested a lot of money in training them here, that's a win for the state and will help us draw more of this industry in. And the neighboring state provision, we have Indiana and Ohio on our southern border who also train a lot of this workforce. And I think, they'd be better off in Michigan than Ohio and Indiana. So we should encourage them to come here. And, some of our utilities, whether they're co-ops or AEP in my neck of the woods, are cross-state utility providers. And so for them being able to bring workforce from Ohio or Indiana, I guess in theory Wisconsin, into Michigan is a big win. And the workforce would have to stay in the state for at least 3 years before they'd be, the incentive would be eligible. So we're not trying to draw people in to, collect a check and then walk out. The plan is to get them to settle here, establish themselves and continue being a productive part of the state. We worked really closely with the Nuclear Energy Institute on this, and they said that they believe this package of bills, as introduced, is it's probably the top one in the country at the moment. We're getting copied by other states. New Jersey, Indiana, Texas are all kind of flirting with different elements of this package, and so our ability to get this done first really puts us at the top, and because we're doing it in a bipartisan way, we're sending a really strong signal to the industry that Michigan is a state where they can count on reliable support that isn't going to blow with political wins. So we're looking forward to getting these moving, hopefully beating some of our neighboring states to the punch on this.
Thank you, Representative Andrews. Appreciate the bipartisan leadership from Energy Chair Wenzel and you working with her here. And hopefully at least we can get them moving through the Rules Committee today. So on that note, I have some cards to read in. Do we have any other questions? All right. I'll read in some cards. We have John Fran from the Michigan Electric Co-op Association in support of House Bill 41-4029, not wishing to speak. In support of House Bills 4125 and 4129, not wishing to speak, is Joe Fedewa from DTE Energy. In support of House Bills 4125 and 4129, not wishing to speak, is Dave Worthams from the Michigan Manufacturers Association. In support of House Bill 4125, not wishing to speak in support, is Daniel Hurley from the Michigan Association of State Universities. And in support of House Bill 4125 and 4129, not wishing to speak, is Ed Rivett from Michigan Conservative Energy Forum. All right. With that, Representative Wenzel moves to report House Bill 4125 with recommendation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Schuette?
Yes.
Representatives Aragona?
Yes.
Wenzel? Yes. Martin?
Yes.
Posthumus?
Yes.
DeBoer?
Yes.
Whitwer?
Yes.
Liberati?
Yes.
Hersberg?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The motion does prevail.
House Bill 4125 is reported with recommendation. All right. Now Representative Wenzel moves again to report House Bill 4129 with recommendation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Schuette?
Yes.
Representatives Aragona?
Yes.
Wenzel? Yes. Martin?
Yes.
Posthumus?
Yes.
DeBoer?
Yes.
Whitwer?
Yes.
Liberati?
Yes.
Hersberg?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The motion does prevail.
All right. House Bill 4129 is reported with recommendation. And there being no further business before the committee, the House Rules Committee will stand adjourned.